Welcome in. I am your host, Colin Basch here. We are going to talk about spring previews for Alabama, Georgia, Michigan, Ohio State, and Texas A&M. Jaden Davis and Deuce Robinson also committed, and we have some quarterback drama. We're going to go through the latest commitments in the battle between Ohio State and Michigan within the recruiting ranks. Without further ado, let's get into the show.
Here's Edwards with the legs. Edwards down the sideline. Gets past Ransom. Donovan Edwards. Touchdown, Michigan. The
play action. Bennett looks down the middle. McConkey's wide open. Touchdown, Dogs.
And make sure you guys check out Loudmouth Sports for more content, specifically Loudmouth CFB twice a week, Sunday at noon Eastern time and 6 p.m. Eastern time on Wednesday nights. Make sure you guys like and subscribe. Without further ado, let's get into it. We're going to start by talking about Alabama. And the first thing that comes to my attention about the Alabama Crimson Tide is the quarterback battle. And specifically how nobody wants to talk about the quarterback battle in Tuscaloosa. Jalen Milroe, Ty Simpson. The popular choice is Ty Simpson because we saw Jalen Milroe for about a game and a half as the starter, essentially, when Bryce Young went down in the Arkansas game. Saw him for the rest of Arkansas. We saw him for the entirety of Texas A&M. Was not a pretty offensive performance. But here is the thing. A lot of you guys are not realizing what Tennessee fans have realized about Joe Milton. If there's talent there and there's a ball of clay there and you can form a sculpture, try to form the sculpture instead of just trying to steal somebody else's clay sculpture that they already made. And, you know, they're trying to say essentially that Ty Simpson's already ready. Do we know that? Because the second you pick up that clay sculpture, that is Ty Simpson, are you sure it's not going to crumble? And maybe clay sculptures is not the right analogy for this situation. But I can tell you what I think is the right analogy. Kenny Pickett. That's the right analogy. You know why? Because it all came together for him his final year of college football. And there's many more quarterbacks that have had that. So if you're an Alabama fan, why are you so against the idea of Jalen Milroe developing into a great player? I mean, after all, last year during the spring game, you guys were hyping up Jalen Milroe, telling me how great of a player he's going to be. When I was saying Ty Simpson was going to be the future of the Alabama program. How did we flip sides here? The answer, you saw him before he was ready. Now, seeing people before they are ready is something that is a fear, apparently, for these Alabama fans because they are fearful to see that Caden Proctor is getting reps with the ones at Alabama. And I definitely don't think that Caden Proctor is going to be a starter for the Alabama Crimson Tide when it's all said and done. I mean, you're talking about a very inexperienced group on the offensive line. I almost said experienced. No, it's very inexperienced. And you know that you're probably going to have Terrence Ferguson, first off, running at center is very interesting to me, but you're probably going to have a situation where Elijah Pritchett is going to be the guy that starts at right tackle. I don't think it's going to be Caden Proctor. Seth McLaughlin is an experienced guy. Darian Dalcourt, experienced guy. And we know what J.C. Latham is. Left tackle, he's going to be an NFL draft pick next year. There's not a whole lot of depth at this offensive line, though, and that's the concern. And when you let a Javian Cohen, Damian George, Tommy Brockermeyer leave the program for whatever issues there might have been on that offensive line regarding NIL, that's what you're going to have is a lack of depth. So getting Caden Proctor the reps now with the first teamers and getting him used to big-time college football, is that really that big of a deal for you Alabama fans out there? I don't think it should be because Caden Proctor is going to be a great player. And we've seen guys like Alex Leatherwood, for example, play as a freshman. We saw J.C. Latham play as a freshman even. They don't need to be a starter to play. And if you ask me, I think he's probably going to get some playing time as the backup tackle in this situation, because I believe they're going to keep Darian Dalcourt in the middle. And this Alabama offensive line still has talent. They definitely have questions and a little bit of dysfunction. Should you be confident, though, in the defensive side of the ball here? Well, let's start with the front seven. The comfort comes with the big guy in the middle. And you know, a lot of people are talking about Jaheim Otis as a dominant type of figure. In an Alabama podcast I listened to earlier, a lot of the comparison was Jordan Davis, right? Eat up a lot of space, be a powerful rusher in the middle. I see a little bit more explosiveness, not quite as much power, if you know what I mean. A little bit more of an explosive athlete. Not exactly the guy that's going to eat up just at least 2 blockers every single play the way Jordan Davis could. But don't get it twisted here. Jaheim Otis is a fantastic player, and he's going to project to be a great one this year. And then you add on what you have at that jack position with Chris Braswell. And then also, of course, we know what we get in Dallas Turner. And Tim Smith is coming back as well. This front seven has a lot of confidence. Justin Jefferson coming in as a linebacker also kind of adds a little bit of love there. And again, in Alabama circles, they're very confident in what they have at linebacker when you add in Justin Jefferson. Do we know what else is going to be there? Well, Jahad Campbell, for starters, is a very, very talented kid, very highly sought after recruit. And you also have Deontay Lawson, who could be a guy that makes a big impact. And I'm hearing great things about Deontay Lawson in spring ball. But if there is a weak point, it is going to be that Mike linebacker position. Is whoever is going to take that over with Dallas Turner next to them, kind of playing a more edge rusher role, maybe. Going to be in there no matter what. He's going to be the edge rusher or the strong side linebacker in the formation, whether it's a 4-3 or a 4-2-5 type of situation. He is going to be in there. You can bet on that. He's going to be rushing off the edge. That's what he does best. But who is going to be that guy in the middle going with Jefferson and Turner? That's going to be the huge development that we got to pay attention to in the months to come for Alabama. This secondary, you know, there's something that's interesting that jumped out at me. Caleb Downs is projected not only to play immediately, but start immediately. But the things I'm hearing about Caleb Downs, and by the way, he is the younger brother of Josh Downs, a 5-star freshman, highly sought after recruit that my Ohio State Buckeyes missed out on. Caleb Downs is going to play immediately. Now, I want to hold this thought about freshmen playing immediately for when we get to Ohio State. But Caleb Downs playing immediately is more so because he's a freak show and he's taking over. But that is kind of part of it. The other part about it is, are we really that sure that that safety position is as solidified as we once thought with Alabama? Because you're going to have a guy in Christian Story who's been there a very long time for Alabama. I mean, I don't even know what recruiting class he was at this point. And you're going to have another experienced guy in Devontae Smith, the other Devontae Smith. But what else do you really have? The other freshman, Bryson Hubbard, Pope, the redshirt freshman. This safety position is not as solidified as I thought it was actually going to be. And Caleb Downs can come in here and immediately make an impact for this defense, which is great, by the way, that he's going to get this opportunity, because you got to at least be very comfortable with what you got at corner. You're hoping that Terrion Arnold takes a step forward and he's not as much of a liability. But guess what, guys? Kool-Aid McKinstry would have probably been a first-round pick if he didn't come back. The best recruiting job Alabama made this year, maybe second best only behind Caleb Downs, the best recruiting, I'm going to say the best, was getting Kool-Aid McKinstry back to school. That was so important for the secondary. And now you get Terry and Arnold. You get a little bit of pressure off of him because as a guy who at times was a liability in coverage, he's not forced to be that cornerback number one. He's not forced to be a guy that's expected to lock down an entire side of the field. And when you bring back Malachi Moore and you bring him into the situation with yet another year under his belt, the experience that he brings to the table, those starting three, the nickel and the two outside corners, could be really, really good for Alabama. So overall for Alabama, when you give a spring update here, I think the biggest thing that you're just going to be looking at in general with the team is there are certainly spots of concern. Offensive line is definitely a concern. How these wide receivers develop is certainly a concern. We're not going to act like it's not. I mean, what is it exactly going to look like? Is Jermaine Burton going to take that jump? Is Ja'Cory Brooks going to put together a full season instead of moments within a season? Is Isaiah Bond, Kobe Prentice, these young receivers going to step up? Are these running backs ready to absolutely take an absolute beating throughout the course of a season and just be able to get back to the great running ways that even Brian Robinson, though he's a good back in the NFL, even after getting shot, didn't produce at as high of a level as you would want as a main back. Now, these two, Roydell Williams and Chase McClellan, they have a guy in Justice Haynes pressuring them from behind on the depth chart. So you got these young players pushing these top players, and we talked about Caleb Downs. We talked about young receivers. You don't really have that on the offensive line right now other than maybe Caden Proctor, and that's what's concerning about Alabama come this spring. We'll see what happens with the quarterback position. I'm not going to speculate any further other than it's pretty clear to me that Jalen Milroe is the favorite for that job, and that's all I got for you. How about the Georgia spring update? Now, this is going to sound a whole lot optimistic, and maybe I'm going to make Georgia sound like an unbeatable team, so let's go ahead and talk about it. First off, they bring in two transfers in Robert Thomas and then also Dominic Lovett. They bring back Arian Smith. They bring back Rosamie Jack-Saint. They also have Ladd McConkey coming back, who's going to, be a versatile guy. And then Anthony Evans is somebody I'm hearing a lot of love about as a true freshman. And also Dylan Bell's a guy who got in moments. They rotated receivers a lot, and Dylan Bell's a guy who actually got in and see if he could take a jump into year two in the system. But the love here is going to Dominic Lovett, and specifically talking about Dominic Lovett working out of the slot. A lot of people think that Oscar Delp is a really good option at tight end. He is not as dominant and as great of a tight end as Darnell Washington was, specifically when you talk about his versatility, being a threat in the receiving game and being able to inline block. Brock Bowers is also not the best inline blocker. So what could we see here? Because Brock Bowers is still a good inline blocker as a tight end. Well, I think you're going to see a lot more, specifically if there's confidence in Carson Beck as a redshirt junior, been in the program for such a long time, and even Brock Vandergriff has been there for a couple of years now. Is there confidence there with that quarterback to be able to open it up a little bit, go more 11 personnel than 12 personnel? What I am suggesting in this situation here is that Georgia is going to open it up because they do not have an option to better utilize one of their best skill position players on the entire team, Dominic Lovett. They're going to have to put him in the slot. And I apologize for you Missouri fans who were hoping that they'd see their dream scenario of Luther Burden year two, making that huge growth, and Dominic Lovett put together this year. It's not going to happen. We'll talk about Missouri come another date, but this Missouri transfer, Dominic Lovett, really impacts this Georgia offense like crazy because they are very, very comfortable with a guy out of the slot, more so than Ladd McConkey, by the way. Because Ladd McConkey was not just a slot guy. Again, he has versatility, but he is better next to the slot, not in the slot. He's able to work from the outside, and quite honestly, again, he's better that way. When all the attention on one side of the field cannot go to him, and he's also not really able to do a whole lot against a much bigger defender that also has range and athleticism and is able to pop you over the middle. That's what happens with the slot. You got to be, nice and smooth. And that's what Dominic Lovett is. Seeing how he is popping in spring ball, that is huge. And also seeing how Robert Thomas, the Mississippi State transfer, develops is also going to be something that's fun to watch. Defensive side, first off, so we know about Kendall Milton getting hurt. For those of you that don't know, Kendall Milton got hurt, which that's fine. That gives a little bit more exposure to Dejon Edwards and Bronson Robinson. I hope Kendall Milton gets better soon. But a guy who's going to be missing reps here in the spring that maybe could use the reps to develop and vault his way to a very great season. I'm talking All-American honors season is Michael Williams, who ended up getting hurt earlier this week. Now you're all of a sudden talking about a situation where a guy who could take that leap into an All-American level, and Michael Williams, is missing some crucial time in development. Winter training is the best part of body transformation, but to me, Michael Williams wasn't that guy that needed desperate body transformation the way that some of these kids do. He needs X's and O's experience against the best of the best, and he's not going to be able to get that injured, unfortunately, and that's what sucks about this. Overall, though, the biggest takeaway I have for Georgia is they returned so much on this defense, and they are expecting to be dominant again on defense. But the one thing I'm going to tell you guys, before we talk about Ohio State, do you guys remember when you criticized Jim Knowles' 3-safety philosophy? Well, isn't it quite fascinating to you that Javon Bullard, who, by the way, I said was more of a safety than a corner, and he's just playing in the nickel because they need somebody to play in the nickel. Isn't it funny how Javon Bullard is taking reps at that deep safety position that Chris Smith was in, opposite Malachi Starks? It's almost like Georgia threw out 3 safeties all year last year when Javon Bullard was in the slot. Now, who would be playing that star position? I have no idea. It's probably Tyke Smith. But I have no idea. Tyke Smith's still on the roster. Don't even know how. I have no idea who they're going to put in that star position. But I can tell you one thing. The guy who's getting the deep safety looks, it is not any guy who has been repping as a backup there for Chris Smith. It is Javon Bullard. And Javon Bullard is in the safety's body. And I thought the same thing. He did much better in zone than he did in man. He did well in man. And he was their best cover guy for the nickel. When you're talking about, okay, we got Kamari Lassiter on one side. We have Keely Ringo on one side. You got it right there. He's not going to be moving to the outside. And it's going to be Dalen Everett having to take a step up opposite of Kamari Lassiter, who has to be that lockdown option instead of a liability in that secondary for Georgia. Overall, you're seeing the replacement of Keely Ringo and Chris Smith take place, and I think the safety position is going to be fine because Javon Bullard is a good player. But we'll have to see how the development of Dalen Everett and Kamari Lassiter goes, so that way they can have those 2 islands to themselves on the right and left. And by the way, that's how Kirby likes to play it. Strictly left, strictly right. Guess who had an early spring game today? The rivals of my school, the Michigan Wolverines, had a spring game today, and I was not quite prepared for this. But the biggest thing that a lot of people are actually ignoring about Michigan is specifically the ability for J.J. McCarthy to develop this spring. Now, what exactly is different about this spring compared to the last 2 that J.J. McCarthy was about or a part of? He is fully available for this spring. He was out all spring last year, and he was limited with the reps that he got the spring before as a freshman. This is going to be huge for J.J. McCarthy, and specifically getting all of winter conditioning was awesome for him, but this is going to be huge for him to now perfect his skills. Perfect that deep ball. Make it a whole lot better. Now, are you going to watch the spring game and take much from it? I personally am not. It was cold. It was windy. nobody could really throw the ball all that well in those conditions, especially with it just being a spring game. And you kind of had to know that the defense would shine. But a guy that shined is Josiah Stewart, who's looking to be the next great edge rusher at Michigan. And I was talking to Tyler about this at Loudmouth Sports. He's got his own Loudmouth Sports side channel going on, and he talked about Michigan's spring game. So go ahead and check out that video. Tyler Isley, LSN. But Josiah Stewart is a guy who really stood out in this scrimmage, according to him. And, this is something that is going to be huge for Michigan to have that dominant edge rusher, because I personally don't think Mike Morris was that same type of dominant edge rusher that you really needed. Now, the biggest thing that helped Michigan be able to be a dominant run defense and get a push at the defensive line there, though they didn't pressure the quarterback the absolute best, they still got pressure as a team on the quarterback. They just didn't have that dominant guy off the edge to get to him, but Mazi Smith was a dominant force eating up the middle. Can Mason Graham develop into that? We'll have to see. Chris Jenkins, can he develop into that? We'll have to see. Jury's still out on it. I don't think they're as much of freaks for sure that Mazi Smith is. But having that guy who could potentially be that dominant edge rusher who steps up with that experience that he has, that is huge for Josiah Stewart. And also huge is the fact that I do 100% think that linebacker position is upgraded. You bring in Ernest Hausman. You get development for Junior Colson and Michael Barrett, who, let's face it, they were very good against the run. They were not great in pass coverage. So hopefully if they can work on that side of the game, Michigan's defense is going to be even better than last year's. And a lot of people were talking about Michigan's defense in 2022 being better than 2021's. I very strongly disagreed with that all year. And, looking back now, I really disagree with that. They played lesser competition. That's just what it has to do with. And Ohio State was able to get some progress going on offense. Now, absolute credit goes to Jesse Minter, the defensive coordinator, in adjusting in the second half and shutting down Ohio State. But we remember what TCU was able to do to that Michigan defense in the Fiesta Bowl. And that's not me saying that Michigan had a bad defense last year. It was one of the best defenses in America last year. And you always got to be prepared as a fan base. If you hang your hat on defense, you're going to have those games where you allow points, because the name of the game is offense nowadays. That's just how it is. That's how the table turned. Just like Georgia had to survive against Ohio State, who put up 41 on them to be able to move on to the national championship and eventually win the national championship in blowout fashion. I think this defense could be better with the development. Specifically, this front seven is definitely going to be better with the development of those linebackers. You also got Hill Green below him. You got Pollard and Rolder going into their second year in the system. But the big question mark for Michigan fans is going to be the cornerback position. How we know about Mike Sainer still locking down the slot. We know about Will Johnson. But who's going to be opposite? That's number one. Is it going to be Jaden McBurrows coming back? I don't know if that's going to be the case. Is it going to be Miles Pollard? We'll have to see. Cody Jones, is he going to be able to make those plays? I'm not sure. But the one thing I will tell you is you can look at the safety position and you can see Rod Moore. You can see Makari Page. You can see RJ Moten and their Quentin Johnson. Not Quentin Johnston. Quentin Johnson. You can see this experience that they have at safety. And you have that over-the-top help, and you have one side of the field locked down with probably the best corner in college football in Will Johnson. For Tyler out there who's concerned about the cornerback position and specifically that opposite cornerback position, if I'm a Michigan fan, what am I so afraid of? What's the worst-case scenario? You throw out a kid like Jaden McBurrows, or you throw out some experienced player who's been on the roster for a while, or you throw out some young kid who just needs a little bit of love there. you got that safety help over the top. I mean, you got 4 safeties who could start almost anywhere in the Big Ten. At least 3, certainly 3. RJ Moten, Makari Page, and Rod Moore. All 3 could start virtually anywhere in the Big Ten. So, if I'm a Michigan fan, I'm not all that concerned there. I'm a little bit more concerned about wide receiver. Roman Wilson is back. Cornelius Johnson's back. AJ Henning's back. Now, out of the guys that I like the ceiling of the most, it's definitely AJ Henning. I think he's got that versatility. He can work out of the slide. He can work outside. He can take jet sweeps. He can take end arounds. In fact, remember the end around that he had to start off the Ohio State-Michigan game back in 2021, where he house called it, followed his blocks great, has good vision, and is a decent route runner. But the thing is with him is he's just not consistent. He sometimes disappears. Roman Wilson is a little bit more of that consistent guy. Cornelius Johnson turned into a guy that's very hit or miss late in the year as well. And he's been that way his entire season, or this entire season, pardon me. So who's going to be the guy that steps up at wide receiver is going to be something to watch for early in the season next year. They're going to be playing against weaker competition. That'll be a good time to really see who can really take the top off of defense, maybe. Who's going to be a consistent possession receiver, a Charlie Jones type of wide receiver. It'll be interesting to see with this Michigan Wolverines team. I just want to take a break to ask you guys if you really think that spring ball is going to really indicate how far Peyton O'Leary. We got Peyton O'Leary here. That's who Tyler's talking about at wide receiver. Peyton O'Leary from apparently a bigger wide receiver for the record. But is spring ball going to really tell you a whole lot about who is going to be starting at the end of the day? Because when you're talking about my team, Ohio State, we're going to talk about, to start, a young player who's not running with the ones right now. So early on with the Ohio State Buckeyes, you have a starting lineup that is pretty familiar. You got Josh Proctor. He's been here since the national championship in 2002, so he's been a part of 2 national championship teams by now. Sarcasm aside, though, he's got the experience. He's holding down the post safety position. Latham Ransom is in as well, and that's expected, right? Returning starter, was the best safety on Ohio State's team last year. A lot of people might raise Rocket Hickman. Latham Ransom had a couple of bad games. He was bad in the Maryland game, and he was pretty bad against Georgia, that's for sure. Arian Smith still running after Latham Ransom slipped. And Ohio State, I heard on a media outlet, and I don't even know who said this, probably Austin Ward. Ridiculous dude, but that's for another time. Maybe the broken leg was still affecting him when he slipped. He can develop and become better, but you don't need to use an injury that happened a year prior to that situation and been playing all year before that. You don't need to use that as an excuse. And then finally, the other guy who's been repping at safety or nickel is Cameron Martinez. Cameron Martinez famously was the one who got burnt on the double move by Cornelius Johnson, for the record. And it's interesting to me to see that Cameron Martinez is actually having a great spring. But one thing sticks out to me. Everybody around Ohio State thought that was Sonny Styles' spot. And maybe it'll become Sonny Styles' spot at some point. Or maybe he overtakes Josh Proctor at the deep safety. But last I checked, that was supposed to be Kai Stokes up there and Sonny Styles down there where Cam Martinez is and Latham Ransom there. They want to go younger there in the fan base. But Ohio State, Jim Knowles, Perry Eliano, Tim Walton, the defensive backs need to be experienced according to those guys running that back there, running the entire system back there. And Latham Ransom got a big tackle for loss pop thing going over social media today. And I'm just like, where was the blocking in that situation? Well, let's talk about the offensive line here. So today, the developing situation that happened was Zen Miholski went down with an injury. And by the way, 2 guys went down with an injury. Somebody who was repping with Cameron Martinez was Jahad Carter, the transfer from Syracuse. He's hurt. He got hurt today. He has a knee injury. The staff is saying that it's not supposed to be a long-term injury. We'll see if that holds. But Zen Miholski also got hurt. Now, why is this important? Because there is a well-advertised battle at that right tackle position between Zen Miholski and Tegra Shabola. Now, some people think Tegra was pulling away from that job. Other people, including myself, thought that Zen Miholski would end up prevailing. This really sets back Zen Miholski. And it, again, weakens the depth of that Ohio State offensive line. What is promising to see about the depth of the offensive line, Donovan Jackson didn't play. Enoch Vimahi had moments, including clearing a hole to be able to get Chip Trainum a nice little 70-yard touchdown run. I think it was an explosive run play, which, by the way, Chip Trainum with the explosiveness, I like to see it, but that's also concerning for the defense, but I digress. Jacob James also, a center that's been in the program for a while. He's missing spring, and it's sounding like a guy that's going to be starting at center is going to be Carson Hinsman, who was an interior guy but really could be flexed anywhere. And then you have Vic Cutler, who helps with it because he's played all 5 positions when it comes to versatility in college football, the Louisiana Monroe transfer. Now, of course, at Ohio State, he does not have the size to play tackle, but he was guarding Will Anderson last year, and he was guarding Texas defenders and Dallas Turner as well on the opposite side too. It is interesting to me to see how this offensive line is playing out because I am very comfortable with the depth and the ability on that interior because you also have Matt Jones there, who nobody's really talking about in the interior, who could have easily played center, but Carson Hinsman's taken that role on. Jacob James, when he gets healthy, is going to be a solid backup. Enoch Vimahi's showing that he's a solid backup because Donovan Jackson did not play, who, by the way, is probably the best guard in America. Don't mean to ruffle any feathers when I say that, but that's probably the truth. It's probably going to be the top 1 or 2 prospects in the NFL draft when it comes to offensive guards. The tackle position. We're pretty sure about Josh Fryer playing left tackle, but I'm not positive how good he is. I'm not positive how well he can handle that left tackle position. As far as right tackle goes, again, we're having a huge battle here between Tegra Shabola and Zen Miholski. And by the way, Miholski's now hurt. So where does George Fitzpatrick fit into all of this is my question. Apparently his development's not there yet, which may be a little bit concerning, but I'm not overly concerned about George Fitzpatrick's development. Whenever he gets developed the way that Justin Fry wants him to be, George Fitzpatrick is going to be a really good tackle, probably better than any of the previous 3 that I mentioned, Tegra Shabola, Zen Miholski, and Josh Fryer. He's probably going to be the best of all of them when it's all said and done. Luke Montgomery kind of fits that category too, but they're not there yet. It's definitely not Luke Montgomery who got there 2 seconds ago. So the offensive line play is interesting, and what's also very unfortunate about this situation is you look at the quarterback battle. And while Kyle McCord is showing the fact that he is not a statue, he's willing to lower his shoulder, he's willing to just go and get whatever is necessary. He is looking like a silent competitor in a different way that Devin Brown's looking like a confident competitor where he's talking a lot, and not just talking a lot, but he feels good about himself. His athletic ability is more there than Kyle McCord. I think we all know that. He's not able to display it as much because of that black jersey. There was one situation where, the defense was able to get pressure virtually immediately. And I'll talk about the starting defensive line in a little bit and then move off of Ohio State. And he tried to spin off and extend it with his legs, but they blew it dead because of that black jersey. And a lot of people there were like, well, I'm pretty sure he wasn't going to get sacked. the inability to show off and display your athletic ability in live reps, at least that people can see, right? Maybe they're having some contact stuff with quarterbacks outside of that situation, but that is a very sketchy situation for Devin Brown to have to deal with. So again, the favorite is definitely Kyle McCord, but just a little bit ago today, Ryan Day came out and talked and said that nobody is pulling away. He wanted to name a starter after spring, and I'm calling BS. Like, I don't think he wants to put the hands in a backup Lincoln Kindholz, a true freshman that just got there, or have your backup be Tristan Gebbia, which glory or God bless him, but Tristan Gebbia is there for the same reason that a guy like Gunnar Hoke came to Ohio State, or a guy like Jack Tuttle is up at Michigan. It's to be able to learn and eventually parlay that into a GA situation. Now, we saw a similar situation when Gardner Minshew tried to go to Alabama to essentially be a GA. He was going to be like a fifth-string quarterback and then transition to a GA. But guess what? Mike Leach, rest his soul, called him up and said, why be on the bench at Alabama holding a clipboard when you can come up here and throw for 5,000 yards? And sure enough, that's what happened. Be a Heisman finalist, right? So am I comfortable if Tristan Gebbia is that guy? Well, I'll wait until after I hear a little bit more about Tristan Gebbia, but probably not. I mean, he wasn't good enough to start at Oregon State, who wasn't swimming in great quarterback play with Chance Nolan, guys you never heard of, right? And then eventually the freshman that name slip in my mind for a second, but point being is Ryan Day doesn't want either of these guys to leave. So even if it's not a competition now, he's going to say that it is a competition to everybody in the world, even if he knows right now who the starter is going to be. And by the way, that defensive line, man, they're going to be really good. Jack Sawyer moving more to a defensive end role is going to be amazing for him, the leader in sacks, but he basically got that in garbage time. I tell you, per snap, the leader in sacks is interior guy Michael Hall Jr., who was an absolute menace today. He's so quick off the ball, so explosive as an athlete. If you're talking about a guy to be that next great defensive tackle, I've been talking about Michael Hall Jr. I think talent-wise, last year he was the best defensive tackle in the Big Ten. I think this year, no doubt. And same, by the way, Tyleik Williams is a similar way. I think he's more like fitting that Jordan Davis type of role if you're talking about defensive tackles. But having those two, 1-2 together, hey, Larry Johnson, we love Ty Hamilton. He deserves to get some snaps. He definitely deserves to be in that rotation. But your two starters are Mike Hall and Tyleik Williams, and all of Ohio State Nation knows that. And we know what JTT is, Jalen Tui Molowau. We know that Caden Curry's taking massive leaps and Kenyatta Jackson looks like a freak. And we know that they're going to be able to go 10 deep on that defensive line no matter what. We know that CJ Hicks is showing sparks. We know that Gabe Powers is making progress. We know that Cody Simon is doing well with the experience. This front seven is going to be really good for Ohio State. Don't look now, but Ohio State's going to get a lot of pressure on opposing quarterbacks next season. Final update, I want to make this one a little bit quicker. It's Texas A&M. The spring update for Texas A&M, and the first thing I want to talk about is the combination of Weigman and Petrino. Specifically, the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that it seems like Jimbo Fisher has a good amount of appreciation for having a guy like Bobby Petrino on staff. Again, say whatever you want about his moral character. That has nothing to do with how Bobby Petrino can coach football and give advice about football. He's not praising him for his life advice, okay? So beyond that point, I'm still skeptical, and I'm waiting to see if this is actually going to be Bobby Petrino's offense or if it's still going to be Jimbo's offense. I want Jimbo to get rid of that stupid play sheet and just give the reins to Bobby Petrino, because I think that Connor Weigman is a star in the waiting right now. And he was able to display it in a dysfunctional system that Texas A&M had down the stretch, showing off that arm and beating LSU and taking the team far with that. Now, I'm curious to see what happens with the running back position. Is Amari Daniels going to be good enough to make up for the gap that talent was with Devon Achane last year at running back? Here's what I'm hearing, though. Tyron Smith, Noah Thomas, Jalen Preston, these guys are pressing Anais Smith, who has been a mainstay on this Texas A&M offense for playing time. Now, we know Moose Muhammad and Evan Stewart are going to play. This is not a question. Moose Muhammad been there for a minute. He's a good wide receiver, very reliable. Evan Stewart, though he's injured for this spring, if he can get back healthy, he already was a really good, he was probably the best freshman wide receiver, maybe in all of America last year, but certainly when you're talking about in the SEC, I can't think of a freshman who was better throughout the duration of the season than Evan Stewart. Okay? This wide receiver core has a lot of depth, is what it's sounding like to me. I am curious about this offensive line. They definitely don't have a lot of experience, but they have good enough players, good enough talent on that offensive line that it'll be interesting to see how quickly it can gel together. I'm watching that guard position. I think that guard position for Texas A&M could be a vulnerability if they can't get a guy like Ken Dewberry up to speed there. But overall, I really like what I see offensively developing. It's just we got to move in a different direction in a new era, Jimbo. We got to move. This defense I really love with the two Shamar Stewart, Shamar Turner, on that defensive line. You also have, Fadil Diggs really taking steps forward, but I'm a little bit concerned about the depth here for the defensive line because of just all the transfers that you ended up losing. And the other thing I'm going to bring up and mention is how poor they are now in the secondary with all that they lost. You have Tyreek Chappell back, which I think he's a really good corner. He can hold down one side of the field. And they bring in Tony Grimes, who is he was all ACC. He's a really good cornerback. I really like Tony Grimes. But beyond that, there's not a whole lot of depth, in my opinion, or at least not a whole lot of proven depth. And that free safety position, I am curious to see if Gilbert can really fill that void that Antonio Williams is leaving behind. And I know Damani Richardson is an experienced, good player, but is he going to take that jump forward to be a fully impactful player and a dominant guy in the back end for Texas A&M? That'll be interesting to me, something to watch for sure. The depth here for Texas A&M on defense overall, I think is certainly a concern. I like their starting two corners. I like their edge rushers. But beyond that, it's a lot of unknown on this defense. I love this offense. Question a little bit about this defense, hoping that they can get it all together here. So I'm going to check here to see if there's any comments, and there are not, before we get into the next part, which is just the recruiting side of things. So, Jaden Davis commits to Michigan. And I find this hilarious and fascinating. And I was telling Tyler about this and everybody in the group chat about this too. Jaden Davis did want to go to Ohio State. There's no denying that Jaden Davis wanted to go to Ohio State at first, right? Said that he idolized Braxton Miller. He loved what Ohio State did, but Braxton Miller was his dude growing up, apparently. His words, not mine, right? Ohio State, way back when this all started, said, we don't really want you. We're going to take this kid, Dylan Raiola. Now, Raiola, of course, we know what happened with him. And right now, he's got crystal balls to Nebraska, Georgia, USC. I don't even know, man. I mean, we could talk about Dylan Raiola in another video. I do not have time to talk about it. So this is what I'm going to talk about when it comes to quarterback recruiting as a whole with Dylan Raiola. Mixed bag. That's all I'm going to say about Dylan Raiola, because that could be a huge segment, just Dylan Raiola's recruitment in its own. But Jaden Davis then said, you know what? Now that you need a quarterback at Ohio State, I'm going to entertain you. Just so I can turn around and say, I'm going to Michigan. I'm going to basically tell everybody, dude, I never really even thought about Ohio State. I want to go and beat them. And he will, by the way. Okay? At least once in his career as a starting quarterback at Michigan, he's going to beat Ohio State. We've seen this song and dance before with J.J. McCarthy rejected by Ohio State. The only difference is, by the way, Ohio State picked Kyle McCord over J.J. McCarthy, and when it was all said and done and decision day came for Jaden Davis, he picked Michigan over Ohio State. That's the difference. Ohio State picked one player over J.J. McCarthy, the Michigan quarterback. This player picked one school, Michigan, over the other school, Ohio State. Now, what is interesting about this, we look down at the number 7 quarterback in the class for Ohio State, Aaron Olin. Guess what happened? You will never guess what happened today. He got the offer, and he's committing in a week. Interesting. Let me tell you what's going on with Aaron Olin. I'm going to let you guys in on a little bit of a secret. Either he's going to Clemson or he's going to Ohio State. That's it. That's what it is. If Clemson was able to get in on him soon enough, I'd be very shocked if he goes to Miami. I'd be very shocked if he goes to Oregon. He's either going to Ohio State or Clemson. And he's probably going to be that guy in Ohio State's class. He's been to Ohio State several times. I still don't know why Ohio State didn't offer him until now, but they finally did just a few hours ago. And they did. That's done. But if Ohio State swings and misses on Aaron Olin, they have nowhere else to go. And Ohio State is going to be in a very, very tough position when it comes to quarterbacks in the 2024 class. Other quarterbacks, just a little bit of a plot twist, and this is kind of where you had to know that once this domino fell, you knew that Michigan was going to get Jaden Davis. And also, you kind of knew that Georgia was going to be all in on Dylan Raiola, and that was kind of the bigger part about it. Jake Merklinger commits, and I hope I'm saying that right. I'm sorry to the kid if I'm not. Jake Merklinger commits to Tennessee. He's a 97th national player. He's the 10th ranked quarterback. He's got good tape. I haven't watched a whole lot of him, but the little bit I've watched, he's got good tape. And I like him, but he might be a little bit more of a developmental player, but that's a big pickup for them. Now, Dylan Raiola is getting targeted, something that could be a domino effect with that. If Dylan Raiola commits to Georgia, who he is partially crystal balled to, watch out for Ryan Puglisi to maybe decommit. I mean, he is a Connecticut kid. He's not from the area. Maybe he's got more dreams than the 4-star wide or the 4-star quarterback, the number 200 player in the class, Ryan Puglisi. See if he shies away from it and just says, I'm going to go elsewhere and try to give myself a better shot at becoming the starter. Because there's going to be a hype train to be able to get Dylan Raiola on the field as soon as possible. And again, we'll talk about that in a little bit. All right, we're going to talk about some commitments. But first, I just want to break down one thing before we do this. The Ohio State-Michigan battle is a little bit blown out of proportion. Yes, they got Jordan Marshall. Yes, they got Jaden Davis. But we kind of knew, if you're really paying attention and you take off your fan glasses, Ohio State fans, we all kind of knew that Jaden Davis was going to go to Michigan. And Jordan Marshall, as far as that happened, look, Ohio State lost that recruitment. Fair and square, man. I mean, there was nothing dirty about it. He picked the better option for him, if you ask me, because look at how running backs have been producing the last 2 years, how Blake Corum has looked, how Hassan Askin looked and was able to, despite lacking some sort of measurables that you love and some sort of hype that you love, He's still in the league backing up Derrick Henry now. And if Derrick Henry gets shipped off, guess what? Maybe Hassan Haskins is that running back one in Tennessee. And you're getting all that love for Donovan Edwards. Is Jordan Marshall really making the wrong decision going up to Michigan? I don't think so. But the one thing that's getting blown out of proportion, too, is seeing Ben Roebuck come off the board here. And Michigan fans completely blew it out of proportion after what happened with Luke Hamilton from Avon. No offer from Ohio State. And the same thing with Ben Roebuck. Well, Ohio State's just not evaluating properly. They're not looking at the right places. Oh, wait. They got Devontae and Deontay Armstrong, two offensive linemen from St. Edwards, the same high school that Ben Roebuck goes to. You think Justin Fry wasn't watching tape and seeing this other tackle opposite of one of the Armstrong twins? Still going to have to figure out which one plays tackle, which one plays guard, man. The names are like, too confusing for me. But Devontae and Deontay. I'm pretty sure Deontay is the tackle, but I don't hold me to that. You're telling me that Justin Fry is watching that. He's not able to say, hey, this kid, Ben Roebuck, he's also a good player. We should probably go out and offer him, Ryan. We should talk to him. We should bring him onto campus. No, they don't think he was good enough for Ohio State. Whether he turns out to have a great career or not, we will reevaluate this very moment 3 years from now, 4 years from now, whenever Ben Roebuck gets his chance, of course, if he gets that chance. We will reevaluate it later. But for now, this isn't a massive takeover that Michigan is having in the state of Ohio. They beat Ohio State on one kid in the state of Ohio. Now, that is a big deal, okay? Ohio State is supposed to lock down the state of Ohio. And what is starting to happen is you're seeing, though they are projected to go to Ohio State, you're seeing Aaron Scott, Bryce West, Aaron Scott from Springfield, Bryce West from Cleveland, Glenville, entertain Michigan. And Aaron Scott entertain Oregon. And it's not a lock that they're going there. Michigan is pushing Ohio State harder for these kids. Just because they don't get him. I think Aaron Scott's a Buckeye. I think Bryce West is a Buckeye. But even if Michigan does not get them, they are pushing Ohio State harder than they have in my memory. I mean, keep in mind, the last time Michigan was reasonably a better program than Ohio State, I was like 10. And that was for a brief time. That was for essentially a year. And before that, all my life, Ohio State was the better program. Michigan's the better program now, and that is showing in recruiting in Ohio State. Is there a problem in Ohio? Yeah, a little bit. But it's not enough of a problem for Michigan fans to brag saying that, whoa, we're taking you guys over. I don't think Michigan's ever going to take over Ohio. I think Michigan's going to be able to steal one or two kids per class from Ohio State in Ohio, which is a problem for Ohio State. But it's not a massive takeover the way that Michigan fans are trying to perceive it. All right, final thing, we're going to talk about the commitments. But first, I want to talk about Deuce Robinson. Deuce Robinson going to Michigan. He'll at least split. Yeah. Deuce Robinson not going to Michigan, going to USC. And he's going to be a tight end / wide receiver, kind of big hybrid guy. But he's very much into this baseball thing. And the question is, how much of that is going to take his time? I'm very concerned for USC about how focused this kid is going to be, because this is the type of kid with his versatility that could get onto the field. Now, he's going to be coming in during summer training. He's not going to get any spring ball. Of course, he just committed after all. But he's 2023. He's not 2024. He's coming in now, right? He stayed uncommitted, and he was between Georgia and USC, and he ended up picking USC. A lot to do with baseball. How focused is he on football? How much does he love football? Is he in football more than he is with baseball? There's a lot of questions going around with Deuce Robinson. But I think, guys, that the upside is just too much for Deuce. And if he focuses on football, which he's going to have to be to become a great player, if he focuses on football, he is going to be a great player. And he's going to be a Kyle Pitts type if he does it, but we'll have to see if he does. All right, before I get out of here, of course, this is taking place right after UConn defeated Miami to get to the national championship late, 11:30 Eastern on April 1st. So some big-time commitments and some big-time chips that have fallen lately. We're going to start with John Mitchell, number 197 overall recruit. He's a number 17 corner out of Jacksonville, Florida. Penn State was able to get a commitment out of him. Then, just a couple more housekeeping type of things. I mentioned them earlier. Devontae and Deontay Armstrong. Devontae is the interior. Deontay is the tackle. I think I had that right then. Okay. So they committed. And, of course, we had Merklinger. We had Jaden Davis. Those two commit to Tennessee and Michigan, respectively. Outside of that, not a whole lot of recruiting news. You have another cornerback out of Arizona, Jeremiah Newcomb, commit to Oklahoma, 209th ranked nationally, 18th ranked corner, and third in the state of Arizona, by the way, which is the state that, of course, Dylan Raiola hails from. Also happening earlier this week, Jeffrey Rush from Ole Miss, defensive lineman, from Mississippi, commits to Ole Miss. And, you know, Mississippi produces some talented kids, and he's one of them. He's the fourth in the state, top three in the state right now. Ole Miss is crystal balled to be able to get Cameron Beavers, who's another defensive lineman in the state of Mississippi. They lost out on J.J. Harrell, who's a wide receiver from the state. He's a top 100 player, just 17th overall. Tennessee has him. And Kamarian Franklin has an open recruitment right now that includes Ole Miss on the list. We'll see what ends up happening with him. But again, he's another defensive lineman, and I can't imagine that all three of them go to Ole Miss. So without further ado, guys, that's going to conclude it for this week's edition. And I don't know what this is going to end up turning into as far as how often I'm going to be able to do it. I guess it's just going to depend on my free time. But hey, every once in a while, I'm going to release a podcast. I'm going to try to get this on Apple as soon as possible. I'm going to look into it right when I get off of here tonight, but certainly it'll be on Spotify. So if you want the audio versions, go ahead and check that out. You can check out all our Loudmouth Sports stuff, and you can check out Tyler's new channel, Tyler Isley Ellison, for sure. He's going to be doing some different stuff, and I'm interested to see what he's going to bring to the table. But without further ado, thank you for listening. I really appreciate it. I'll see you guys next time. Have a great night.
Here's Edwards with the legs. Edwards down the sideline. Gets past Winston. Donovan Edwards. Touchdown, Michigan. The dive.
The play action. Bennett looks down the middle. McConkey wide open. Touchdown, Dogs.